Ready, CNBC TV 18 EBIX Cash Studio.
Hello and welcome to Big Deal. Now, agri-tech companies are seeing a growing interest from the investors with over $1 billion invested last year and a lot more than that expected in this year. Over 3,000 agtech startups have sprung up in India in the last 5 years, but they all put together have a revenue of less than $100 million or so, which gives the many active investors in the space the opportunity to capture the growth potential as the pandemic gives thrust to digitization. To discuss this, we have sector experts joining us on Big Deal today. Let me welcome on the show Mark Khan of Omnivore Partners, Krishna Kumar from Cropen Technology, and Ajay Kakra of PwC. Gentlemen, so good to have you on CNBC TV 18. First of all, Ajay, help us understand why this sudden surge of interest in agri-tech.
Yeah, thanks, Isha. So I would say that this is because of the resilience of the underlying sector. Agri-tech is completely based on the agriculture sector, which has been showing a lot of resilience across last many years. So if you see in the COVID times also, the agriculture growth was going good. And even the last Rabi seasons are very promising, while the sowing for Kharif is also very good. And coming to the ag-tech part, the tech part is really growing good. And it's also showing good growth. We can see 25 to 30% growth in the agri-tech startup segments, which you just mentioned. And also, if you see what's the upside potential for agri-tech, the digital intervention which they are bringing, that is also adding up to a value of around 50 to $65 billion by 2025. So we can see that there's a lot of action happening, and there's a lot of promise for scalability, upgradation, and monetization potential.
Right, monetization potential, one of the key drivers for the fundraising interest that is seen. But one company which has recently raised funds is very active in this space in terms of business. Krishna Kumar, you recently raised funds as well. What is it that the investors are betting on, and what is the growth plan that you foresee with the funds you raised?
Yeah, so I think the sheer nature of the problem statement which agriculture has, and it has a global nature as well. And if I have to, summarize this, I think the investors, when they're looking at cropping, they looked at the way we are delivering solution to our customers, so what problem statement we are solving, whether we can deliver this on the global scale. And we are a SaaS B2B agtech company, and mostly we are delivering AI and deep tech solution to our customers globally. And how seamlessly we can deliver this sitting here. I mean, we built for India, and then we are shipping this product globally. Right? So that was another box we checked. I think the moat which we have built over a period of time. So we work in 52 countries. We have a massive operations and the data on our platform. So we manage around 400 different crops, 10,000 different crop varieties in these 52 countries. And we have got the largest knowledge graph sitting on our platform, which is giving us ability to build AI model with context and also generalize this model to scale this globally as well. Right. So we are delivering at the scale of a country. So we can compute the whole country with our models to map the whole GDP from the agriculture point of view. I think those are some of the key factors where the investors were also interested to see when they're trying to invest, right? So what kind of a moat you are building, how whether your customers are repeatable or not, those large global MNC which were working with you, and then finally the team which is behind the scene, making this happen.
Sure.
So I think all these boxes we checked, and
Yes.
that interested the customers, investors as well.
Right. Let me jump to the investor on the panel straight away. And Mark, Omnivore Partners specializes in investing in this particular space and also the animal-based sector as well. So both put together, what is it that you're betting on, and especially in agri-tech, what kind of future potential growth that you foresee?
Look, we're betting on the future of India. The thesis of Omnivore has always been that in a country where half the population lives on farm and where over a quarter of the economy is agriculture and agribusiness, that you need to have innovation to build a future for rural India, that farmers need to have more profitability, that farmers need more resilience, that there needs to be sustainability. We've been working on these challenges for over a decade. And the bet has always been that the future of this sector would be built by entrepreneurs developing solutions for India's 13 crore farmers. And when we started out, we were the only ones in this space. And over time, others have entered. And we're now at an inflection point where I think more and more investors, more global capital, it has recognized that there is a massive opportunity, that this is one of the largest addressable markets in India, and that people don't want to miss this chance to transform this sector and the lives of 130 million farmers and rural communities. And so that's, what are we looking at? We're looking at, hopefully many decades of growth and opportunity for the largest group in this country.
Yes. So yes, you said you are betting on the growth of India, but also, Mark, you mentioned that you're one of the early investors in this particular space. So coming from your expertise, what will differentiate your investment thesis from the others? Tell us the matrices based on which you differentiate between the companies in the space, and what makes you bet on a particular company versus the other.
Look, we evaluate companies, right, across, I would say, 4 pillars of our investment thesis, and then, across the normal ways that you evaluate any other startup. So the 4 pillars of our investment thesis are: we're looking for technologies and startups that are increasing farmer profitability, because we believe that is the need of the hour. The government has also recognized that doubling farmer incomes is the right way to look at that challenge. We look at startups that are working on farmer resilience. How do we make 130 million farmers, their incomes more stable, more predictable? And then 2 environmental pillars, one being agricultural sustainability. How do we use less water? How do we use fewer natural resources? How do we reduce waste and spoilage? And finally, how do we catalyze climate action? And so we're looking for startups that are working on these 4 massive challenges. And then in terms of the metrics, there's no way to generalize that, right? Because every startup is working in a different way. So to say that there's one magical metric, I wouldn't agree. But I think in general, like all venture capitalists, we're looking for what we call the 4 T's, right? Team, technology, TAM, the total addressable market, and traction. And we want to see a world-class team. One of the most interesting things that's happened in the last decade is the quality of talent coming into agri-tech is infinitely higher than it was 10 years ago. 10 years ago it was idiosyncratic. Now we're seeing people leaving other high-performing startups outside of agri-tech and starting up in agri-tech, right? We talked about TAM. We're looking at people working on the largest challenges in the space. It can't be so niche that it doesn't make sense for venture capital.
Yes.
Technology. We're looking at people that are working on deep tech. We're working, people that are building really innovative, differentiated solutions as opposed to just trading. And finally, we're looking at traction. And that, obviously traction differs by stage, and we invest very, very early. But we're always looking at people that have disproportionate traction to the amount of money they've put in, to the amount of time they've put in. So that's generally how we look at things.
All right. So many matrices, but Krishna Kumar, agri sector is also very archaic in several ways. It needs a complete overhaul, and your sector is quite nascent. What are the areas in which efficiencies have been solved for at the moment, and what lies ahead?
Yeah, I think, when I look back, 10 years back, digitization was not there in agriculture, right? So everything was on pen and paper. And people were looking for digitizing the value chain, moving out of the pen and paper and that big decision to some kind of a platform and technology play. But over a period of time, it has changed. Digitization is one of the key parameters, how you are going to manage your operations. But now they are looking at, can we make this value chain more predictable? Can we make this value chain more sustainable
Yes.
or traceable, right? And then the pillars are: can you maximize my revenue? Can you minimize my cost? And can you manage my risk better?
Yes.
Right? Like any other industry. So that the industry has moved from digitization to taking advantage of data and deep tech technology. For example, recently we mapped whole of the Bangladesh to figure out which farms are producing paddy without even going to Bangladesh. And we are talking about country level compute for one of the largest clients. So they are saying digitization is one of the pillars, but then what do we do with this data and how do we take advantage of it is the next ask. And I see in coming future, from the tech point of view, AI, robotics, and drones, and also hyperspectral imaging is going to become more prominent because they are very, very promising. Just to give you an idea of hyperspectral satellite imaging can augment the sensors from the farm.
Yes.
Because you don't see sensors in India, Southeast Asia, and Africa because sheer nature of the farms, but you don't need them. Because you can read many of those soil nutrients properties through doing the modeling through these satellite images, right? So I think it's very, very promising. I also see some of the new business model evolving, like AgTech enabling the fintech, because you understand the risk better of that crop value chain, and can you link back to the financial inclusion, working closely with the bank or the marketplace. There are various startups are coming up in a market linkages or input linkages, right?
Yes.
So I think those are the new business innovation will happen, and tech has to play a larger role there.
That's right. Apart from getting efficiencies into the place, but also accessibility, connecting people through marketplaces, and also fulfilling the unmet credit demand for the farmers. These are some of the key areas in which agri-tech plays a very important role. All right, gentlemen, hold your thoughts. We have lots more to discuss on what lies ahead in agri-tech on the other side of this very short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching Big Deal and we are discussing the agri-tech sector. Now, Ajay, of course, we heard all the sides of the discussion in terms of the investor interest and what the promoter has to say and what lies ahead in the sector. But agriculture sector is here to stay. We have big boys and big companies, large business houses, part of the legacy business of agriculture. And very recently, we have seen the digital thrust with Tata's buying into Big Basket and some others, as well as even Reliance getting digital in their retail play, and many other companies like UPL also coming up with a platform. What do you have to say about the big companies adopting the digital thrust in this sector?
Yeah, so Nisha, my view is that it is all dependent on the kind of value creation which the company is aspiring towards and the kind of value creation that is being offered. Now, there can be two ways of doing it. Either you create your own value or you look at for outside help for doing that. Now, what we see in the agri sector is that a lot of companies are trying to develop their own capabilities, be it Tata or be it UPL or any other company, who have been doing this over a period of time, and now they are at a stage where they understand the agtech systems, the ecosystem properly. And this is what is also being done by the mid-sized segment companies also, and they're following suit. But what I believe is that this is taking time to seep in, and the adoption process is a continuous process. We can see this trend going on for a little bit more time, where people are conversant and the entire processes are attuned to the agtech operations. So once, so starting from the farmers till the end consumer, the processes gets aligned to the agtech interventions. That's where we see a first stage where the companies are going to reach. And then probably there would be more action in this space.
Right. And do you think that M&A will be a big thing in a few years from now, as some of these smaller startups get their digital bearings right, while the legacy companies need to acquire them to get that technical advantage?
Yes, so that need is very much relevant, and it's also there. People are thinking on those lines. But I would like to now take your attention towards the life cycle of the agtech companies. Agtech companies, they take a little bit time to reach a saturation stage, or rather a kind of a threshold stage where they become a relevant target for acquisitions. So if we see, it takes around 5 to 7 years for a Agtech company to reach there. Now, when we see these 3,000 company startups, a lot of them would be started in the last 4 or 5 years. And once they reach this stage, we can see that some bit of consolidation would be happening. Another factor would be that when we have large investors coming in this agtech space, maybe the Google or the Amazons of the world, they would be coming into this space. That's a place where we would seeing more of deal and acquisition happening in this agtech space.
All right. So beyond fundraising, a lot of M&A also expected going forward. But Krishna Kumar, surely the sector has many challenges. Do you have any suggestions on how some of the hurdles and bottlenecks can be cleared for the growth path to be much smoother?
Yeah, I think government is a large stakeholder in agriculture, and I think they should pave a path for the startups in terms of giving them access to the data which they are sitting on. If you want to enable fintech and you want to get into financial inclusion, which government also wants to do, but they have to open up a land record data, like the way they did, building something like a UPI, where startup can innovate on top of it. So I think government has to come forward and move things a little bit faster. I think there is an intention, but still things moves very slow at their end. From our company perspective, I think some of the challenges we need to overcome, because we do a lot of play in the deep tech side, and we are running a lot of deep neural net models, which is a very, very costly affair. So to give an example, our one-day bill was more than 500K, right? Because it is one of 80,000 servers to do a compute at the country level, right? And we are trying to find out a means and ways how do we make it more efficient.
Yes.
And when we run the layers of neural net, how do you build your architecture to do that, right? So those are some of the learnings. When you are selling AI, you need to build trust with AI in the market, and you have to work very closely with your customer to what your models are intended to deliver.
Yes.
Because the way customer thinks, AI means you're going to give me 100% predictions, which is no AI can deliver that, right?
Right.
And finally, hiring talent globally, and how fast you can do that in this changing environment is also going to play a major role. So I think these are the things we have to work when we are looking for the next phase of the growth.
Right. So Mark, taking off from what Krishna Kumar has mentioned, do you think government being a big stakeholder in this segment, is that a risk factor for an investor?
Look, I think agriculture is inextricably linked to issues of development, and the government is the driver of most development in India. And consequently, they're always going to be partners. I think they have actually been excellent partners in this space for many years now. They have supported early stage startups. They have opened up opportunities for startups to work, both at the center and the state level. I think they've gotten NABARD into this space. I think generally speaking, the government has been a catalyst of the ag tech boom in India. So I wouldn't see it as so much of a risk factor, but definitely creates support and some tailwinds for this sector.
Right. So still sounding optimistic over there. And Ajay, to summarize the discussion, how do you see the change happening in the sector, and in the near future, what are the big data points one must know while looking at agri-tech? All right. We have a patchy line there, but Krishna Kumar, why don't you take that question? What are the new revolutionary things that are about to take place, and how fast can the change be expected?
I think we see so many startups coming up with the new ideas, but I'm very, very bullish on hyperspectral. We don't have any satellites today, but it's a very, very promising technology which we see coming in light in a couple of years, and that will change the fate of the way you do your compute and AI and the kind of solution you can build on top of it. And to give you an example, carbon is one of the big things which is coming up in the industry from the sustainability point of view. Agriculture contributes to around 18% of the carbon emission, which is then goes into global warming, and then it has the ripple effect on agriculture as well. Pest and disease, productivity is impacted by 15 to 30% of the major crops globally. So I think those, with these kind of technology, you can, monitor the carbon, you can measure it, and then you can also, help the farmers to adopt to fix the carbon in the soil, and for that they can get the credit. And these models are now evolving in Europe and in US, and we are part of one of the European coalition where they want to make Europe as a carbon neutral farming, and we are the technology partners there. Right? So I think these are some of the things I'm very bullish on, and this has a positive impact on the industry and the overall planet.
All right, Krishna, you touched upon a very interesting point, because sustainability, ESG, is the main thrust, and you're talking about lowering the carbon footprint of agriculture industry as well. And that will really bring in and attract more investors into this particular space. With that, it's a complete wrap on this edition of Big Deal, focusing on agri-tech. I thank Krishna Kumar as well as Mark Khan and Ajay Kakra for joining us for this discussion. And thanks to our viewers for tuning in.